The point is, look, I wasn't there. If you ask me, is the weight of historical evidence such that Jesus was a real historical figure? I'd say the weight of historical evidence is that Jesus was a historical figure. Is the weight of the historical evidence that Jesus was God? No. The weight of the historical evidence is that he was a revolutionary. He may have had delusions about being God. In particular, his disciples wanted to deify him, I think. But in any case, I do not dispute that the weight of the historical evidence suggests that he was a real person.
Well, what I wanted to say, Lawrence, is that your comparisons of Jesus of Nazareth with Dionysus and Osiris is based upon scholarship that is more than 100 years out of date. And I think that, honestly, you've got to get, I think you've been fed a lot of misinformation by skeptics and internet infidel types that are really misleading you on where historical Jesus scholarship is.
Look, okay, I mean, unlike you, I don't want to try and claim I'm an expert in theology or biblical history. So one may argue that the connections are spurious, and I'm willing to accept that, in fact.
No, well, I hope you'll keep an open mind to the evidence for the empty tomb, the post-mortem appearances, and the origin of the disciples' belief in Jesus' resurrection. Most scholars who have looked at this and have an open mind think that these do belong to the portrait of the historical Jesus, and I don't find any other explanation that it has the same sort of explanatory power, explanatory scope, degree of plausibility as the hypothesis that these original men gave, that God raised Jesus from the dead. Galileo said, as you know, that the purpose of the scriptures is not to tell us how the heavens go, but how to go to heaven.
Yeah,
and so the purpose of the Bible is not to communicate the infinitesimal
and it's not to make
calculus.
And it's not a scientific document, you will agree.
Right, yeah.
Even though the other day when you argued the fact that the Bible predicted the universe had a beginning was
Yes.
an example of the scientific veracity of the Bible.
No, well, yes, in a sense. What I
good.
said is that it is a prediction which can be either verified or falsified by science, and that science has, in fact, verified that.
So it is a scientific document in that regard. Not the fact that it got the order of creation wrong in Genesis or any of those things, but the one thing that happens to agree with what is likely to have happened, the universe had a beginning. So you found one thing that's right, and therefore it's a correct scientific prediction.
What I said was that prediction has been scientifically verified.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. Yes.
Now, just like the prediction in the Rig Veda that the universe began is scientifically verified, and all the other creation myths, which involve the word creation, meaning something arose, the universe arose, they're all been scientifically verified, so they're all just as
No, I don't
useful.
think that is correct. I don't think that's what it says in these other creation myths.
It
they
does
typically
say that,
involve
Bill. Come on, they all say they're called creation myths for a reason.
Oh, but the creation may be a cosmic egg which breaks open, or the blood from a mythological dragon spills out, or the sperm of the gods.
But we all know that you shouldn't take a literal interpretation, like you wouldn't take a literal interpretation of the 7 days. So why should we take a literal interpretation of that bit of nonsense and not a literal interpretation of the bit of nonsense in Genesis?
That is going to depend upon the literary genre of the literature involved. Right? If you're right that these other myths are not to be taken literally, then it would be a literary mistake to take them that way. But
just like Genesis.
That's the question.
Just like Genesis?
Yes, I do not think that.
So the creation myth in Genesis is not to be taken literally.
Correct.
And any statement about the scientific veracity of Genesis is ridiculous.
Not any statement. I mean, for example, that there are animals and four-footed beasts and sea monsters and sun and the moon. I mean, those are all scientific, but it's not a scientific narrative. It is a figurative narrative, poetic sort of narrative about the creation of the world.
Just like all the other poetic narratives
well,
in
that
other
depends.
religions.
Maybe so. I mean, you've got to look at them one by one.
So I don't think you should disparage the poor Norse creation myth. Those poor dead Norsemen
well,
would be very offended.
The question is whether the Norsemen took it literally or not. That's the issue. I mean, we got to look at it on a case-by-case basis.